Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's session. I think it's probably fair to say that we are, since we have the Chief Constable and the Police and Crime Commissioner here with us, and not to mention the Area Commander here, we're probably in the safest place in the whole of Basingstoke and Dean to be this evening.
Hope so.
Yes, let's indeed hope so. A couple of things by way of household administration to tell you about. Firstly, there are no plans for a fire alarm this evening. So if the fire alarm goes off, and you will hear it very loudly, if it does, that is genuine, and we would ask you to leave. There is a fire exit at the back. There are fire exits behind me out the either side here, and to go downstairs and to reassemble in the park just out there, when we will take the book with us and count you all to make sure that we haven't left any behind. The second thing to point out to you is that this evening, as quite a lot of people are unable to be here in person, that the meeting is being webcast. That means that there are cameras on me in particular at the moment, but all of you gradually, if you choose to participate in the meeting, and the meeting will be recorded so that others can watch it at a later stage. So just to be aware that whatever you say will be taken down and could be used in evidence against you in the future. That said, can I introduce you to my fellow guests here on the panel, by way of introduction to myself, who you may not know. I am Councillor Clive Sanders. I am the leader of the Borough Council. I'm also many jobs here. I'm also the chairman of the Community Safety Partnership, and within the council, the portfolio holder for community safety, which I have been doing for more time than I choose to remember, I think. To my, get this right is Simon Hayes. My wife tells me I've got no idea left or right. To my right here is Simon Hayes, the Police and Crime Commissioner. To my left, fairly obviously, is the Chief Constable, and then we have Chief Inspector Dodds, the far left over there, who is the District Commander for Basingstoke and Dean. The programme this evening is that, first of all, I'm going to ask Simon if he can give us an introduction to his police and crime plan and the overarching strategy which we are following within Hampshire, and any particular issues that he wishes to outline to you this evening. And then we will go to Andy Marsh, who will explain to you the way that the constabulary is dealing with the reduction in resources and finances, that basically means, that they have, and how that is going to affect policing in the future. And Simon is here to give any particular input that we need for the local area. So once we've heard from these gentlemen, then there will be plenty of opportunity for you to ask questions, and I do urge you to ask questions, because you won't often get them assembled in one place at one time. And we'll start now. The plan is to finish between 8 and past this evening, so none of you are kept away from your dinners for too long. So would you like to come in and join us, since I'm sure other people will come in. So let me begin then by asking the Police and Crime Commissioner, Simon, to speak. Thank you.
Chair, I'm going to start sitting down. I'm told that because of the podcasting, I might have to stand up. So if I get a signal from someone, I will suddenly stand up. But you'll know the reason why. Chairman, I wanted to speak generally around the future of policing in Hampshire, and then the Chief Constable will talk about the future of Hampshire Constabulary within the context that I'm going to speak. The first point I want to make is that I think protecting Hampshire and the Isle of Wight is not solely about the police service or Hampshire Constabulary. Protecting people and places is, I would argue, the responsibility that we all share across society, individuals, statutory and voluntary bodies. And the police service, Hampshire Constabulary, is of course part of that, but not the whole. And I will argue strongly, and what I will describe around the policing strategy is that partnership is the best way to protect people and places and secure our communities. So I'm going to speak about three areas under that I think influence policing into the future. The first is my role of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, which will incorporate the Police and Crime Plan that the Chairman has spoken about. The second is around criminal justice and the reforms that the government are putting forward and will be implemented during the course of this coming financial year. And I also want to touch on the influence of austerity in police funding, and then that will lead in, I think, to what the Chief Constable is going to say to you. So to deliver safer communities across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, there are three policy strands that I've developed since I've been in this role just about 14 months now. And I'm going to speak about these as well. The first is the Police and Crime Plan. We all have, as Police and Crime Commissioners, a statutory responsibility to deliver a police and crime plan for our area. The second strand is the estate strategy, which is, as it says, it's the maintenance and the existence of the police estate, the buildings and property in our community. The third strand is the commissioning strategy, which is funding that, as Police and Crime Commissioners, we all get directly from the government that used to go to the County Council and Community Safety Partnerships, but now comes to the Police and Crime Commissioner. And the purpose of this money, over £2 million for Hampshire and the Island, is to deliver the priorities within the Police and Crime Plan. And then fourthly, I'm going to touch on the Operational Change Programme, but only very briefly because the Chief Constable will give more detail about that. Operational Change Programme is the organisation of the police constabulary in Hampshire to deliver the Police and Crime Plan. So I want to talk first of all about the Police and Crime Plan. We've all done this as Police and Crime Commissioners differently. The overarching purpose for me is to bring around what I call social change in our society, which is preventing crime in the first place, largely but not exclusively with young people, and also reducing the amount of reoffending that happens in our communities. The Police and Crime Plan has 4 priorities, and it's always easy when you write a plan to write the priorities. It's what comes underneath that that is the critical test. But the priorities are to improve frontline policing. Sure, we would all think that that's a good idea. To bring victims and witnesses at the centre and the heart of both policing and the criminal justice system, which is an area that I have influence as Police and Crime Commissioner. The third priority is to work in partnership with other organisations, so with statutory bodies, voluntary sector, and individuals as well, and on a regional and national basis. And the final priority, it talks specifically about reducing and preventing re-offending. So the priorities are linked together in that they all speak in different ways of keeping our communities safe, how we will do that, and the length of time and targets that are required in order to achieve that. The second strand that I spoke of is the estate strategy. We had, before I took post, an estate strategy of £83 million, which spoke of a little bit of building, a little bit of renewal, but was hugely expensive to run and to maintain the 170-odd premises and buildings and offices that we have. I took the view that into the future we could no longer continue to afford the close on £20 million maintenance bill for our properties. Also that some of the buildings were in the wrong place, and a lot of them certainly were not efficient and effective premises for police officers to function from, and a great number of them were actually closed to the public. So the estate strategy reviewed that, and we now have a new estate strategy that has a price tag on it of just under half of the original estates plan, about £38 £39 million. The main purpose of the estate strategy is to put policing in the community that the police are policing. And you will see over time, over the next 2 or 3 years, a change in the style and shape of policing. You won't see so many police stations. What you will see is police officers and neighbourhood teams working out of other public bodies, organisations, buildings. So you'll see, for example, we've moved in already to Rushmore Borough Council. The Safer Neighbourhood team operates from there. The public are able to come, or will be able to come, to do their business with the constabulary there. And the neighbourhood team, the officers, are at the heart of the community. And we are talking, Chairman, as you know, with Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council to see whether we can mirror a similar arrangement in the area here. The commissioning strategy talks about delivering services, purchasing services from other organisations in order to deliver a prevention agenda and a reduction in reoffending agenda. We are spending, as I say, just over £2 million. We have received bids from over 200 separate organisations across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And the commitment I've given is that that funding will stay in place, providing the organisation delivers what it is that we've asked them to, and they said they will do, providing they do that, and they meet the evaluation criteria. Funding will be in place for 3 years. And we've decided on 3 years for 2 reasons, really. One is that I feel that that gives an organisation a certain amount of stability of funding into the future. And also, in 3 years' time, there will have been another election, and there might well have been another police and crime commissioner in place, and I didn't feel it was right to restrict somebody else in spending requirements. I hope that there might not be another police and crime commissioner in place, but I felt that it was right to consider that as a possibility. And the operational change programme, which the Chief Constable, as I say, will talk about. But I just want to touch very briefly on some of the aspects that I think are, or 2 of the aspects that I think are important. The Constabulary Chief Constable and I talked about what was absolutely important to me, representing the public in the future shape of policing, and we called it the red lines. There were a number of red lines, and the primary one perhaps was that we would maintain in Hampshire and the island the concept of neighbourhood policing. Many other forces have withdrawn from that concept because it can be more expensive to function. But I felt it was hugely important to deliver reassurance to the public and also to help protect people and places that we do maintain the concept of neighbourhood policing in the heart of the communities. And to that end, I also wanted to see, and thinking of the priority I talked about earlier on of partnership working, I wanted to see senior police officer in each district area to liaise and work in partnership both with local councils and other local organisations in order to deliver the policing strategy. So what there is in each district borough council there will be a chief inspector who has those responsibilities. In the 2 counties and the 2 cities there will be a superintendent who has those responsibilities. And the other factor that I think is important is that we've agreed that the number of abstractions will be fewer. Abstractions means officers who are assigned to work within communities, work within neighbourhoods, have quite frequently been taken away from that community or neighbourhood to fulfil other policing requirements. Chief Constable has given the commitment that there will be fewer abstractions and the desire and the wishes that there would be none at all. These are fundamental changes to policing which I think will make a difference, and you'll see in your communities a consistent policing presence. I want, Chairman, just in the last few minutes I have to talk about criminal justice reforms. Some of you might know the phrase transforming rehabilitation. This is the government policy to privatise a large part of the probation service that is offered nationally and across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight by the Hampshire Probation Trust. Effective probation is, in my view, critical to delivering successful education and rehabilitation and reforming individual offenders. And the government's agenda is to privatise the more minor parts, if I can call that, of probation. The probation support given to high-end criminals will continue to be delivered as a public service. So dealing with those who have offended is critically important to keeping a society that sees less offending. And of course, if you see less offending, there are fewer victims of crime and criminality. An exciting part of the government agenda is that they want to, and I think this is absolutely right, support offenders who currently don't have support, and that is the cohort who have been given a prison sentence of less than 12 months. At the moment, they come out of prison or wherever they've been and are just left to their own devices without any really formal support. And this is an exciting development for probation nationally and across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And I hope that that will help to deliver a reduced reoffending. I want to talk also finally about the influence of austerity in terms of policing and the criminal justice system. We all know in public life that government is reducing the amount of money that we're given in grants and funding and so forth. And for the constabulary, over the last 4 years, which is coming to the fourth year is coming to the end of this financial year, constabulary have had to reduce its budget by £55 million. Government are telling us that over the next 2 years they want us to reduce the budget by a further £25 million. The constabulary have been effective and efficient in taking that money out of their budgets by being smarter in the way they work and by working operationally with other forces, and particularly with Thames Valley Police, where we now share a gun unit, a dog unit, and roads policing. And we've also worked in collaboration with other public sector bodies, namely the fire service primarily and the county council, under a grouping that's called H3, so that's Hampshire 3, and the 3 is the police service, the fire service, and Hampshire County Council, in order to reduce the cost of back office work. And we hope that that can develop to include other public bodies and councils into the near future. But what this has meant is that over the last 4 years, most of the easy, if easy is the right word, cuts and savings have been made. The constabulary has reduced the number of police officers and police staff by almost 1,000 in that time. And there's very little more that can be done in order to reduce funding. But nevertheless, Chief Constable and his team have come up with a plan that we call Operational Change Programme, and he will talk to you in detail about that. But I have to say to you that it's my view that when we go beyond the 2 years, if the government insists that we need to find further savings, then I think that it will materially affect the policing service that you receive and recognise on your streets, because we can only reduce by so much and continue to do more with that money. But we want to achieve savings. We want to maintain a quality police service that is at an affordable cost to the public, that offers value for money, that we remain in the bottom quartile of cost to the public for the service that's provided. but we maintain in the top quartile of recognised quality of service. I believe that the new programme that Chief Counsel is about to describe to you delivers what matters to you, the public, and that is safe communities, that is working in partnership, that is local, as I say, neighbourhood policing, and an effective and meaningful engagement with you, the public, when needed, and support from the police when needed. Policing will change into the future. The new direction is exciting. It will look different. It does require partnership working and involvement from other statutory bodies and voluntary sectors. But I believe that the change programme will continue to deliver and reassure the public and provide a safe place to live and work across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight into the future. So, Chairman, very briefly, I think that's my time expired. Clearly, there's more you might like to ask, and there is a question time at the end. So please ask me about what I've spoken about or anything else that you'd like to raise. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon. There will be plenty of opportunities to ask questions, but do please take notes of those for later on. I just made a brief note that it's good, reassuring to know that abstractions does not mean fracking, which seems to be the current trend in these things. And it's also good, I think, probably you still bear the scars of the grilling you were given by the Police and Crime Panel over your budget for the coming year. And I'm very pleased you have those scars, because it shows that it is a very thorough and disciplined process that one goes through to arrive at that money. But at the end of the day, community safety always comes back to being the #1 priority that all of our residents have. Every time we do a piece of research, it comes up as being safe when you're at home or being safe when you go out is the most important thing that you can feel as a resident of the borough, and the one thing that they really do want us to safeguard. And quite clearly, the most important people in creating that environment for us to live are the police, and therefore it is very important that we understand which way they intend to provide us with that environment and how they're going to deal with the enforced, but I'm afraid necessary, restrictions that they now find themselves in. So, Chief Constable, please.
Leader, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yep, I won't shout then. I've got some slides. I think they're going to come up on both sides, which is very exciting. Hopefully they'll be what I expect. Ladies and gentlemen, Leader, thank you very much for inviting me to this splendid venue to speak to you today about policing. Before I started, I just wanted to say a few things about Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council. An outstanding partner for us, and I genuinely mean that in so many ways. I'm going to be talking about some of what's been happening with crime and antisocial behaviour in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight in recent times, and I'll be trying to explain why it's been happening. One thing I'm sure of is that crime and antisocial behaviour has fallen more in your area because you've got an outstanding council working with us to help solve problems, while we deal with the other aspects as well as problem solving around catching criminals and making the environment a hostile environment for people who want to commit crime in your area. And also, it's well worth recognising, Tony's here from Neighbourhood Watch tonight. Policing doesn't happen in England and Wales, let alone Hampshire, without the consent and support of the public. That's the way we do policing in this country, and long may that be the case. But we couldn't have been successful without great partnership working, great public support. And just one other positive thing I wanted to say about the partnership. We've recently had some very serious floods across Hampshire and indeed the Isle of Wight. The police have got a coordinating role with other agencies under something called the Local Resilience Forum to make sure that the services get delivered in a seamless way. Tony Curtis and his team were absolutely outstanding as far as I'm concerned with their local response to it. I know that lots of them gave up their time, worked around the clock, incredibly hard to mitigate the impact of that flooding. And I, as a partner really appreciated working with them. I came to visit their coordinating team during the height of the crisis, and there's a tremendous spirit there, so thank you very much for that partnership work. Now, I'm going to be telling you a bit about what we've done to be where we are now. So I will tell you a bit about the money. I'll show you some stuff, and that's not because I'm looking for sympathy or trying to persuade you that it's wrong. I'm telling you because I want you to understand why we're doing things and what the restraints on me are. I'm also going to tell you how we delivered the £55 million last time, because otherwise you're going to sit there and think, well, why doesn't he do X, Y, Z? And that's because I've already done them. And of course, I'm interested in your questions, but I'm, in a sense, more interested in what you think about things, because I am responsible for leading your police service, and Mr. Hayes is the democratically elected individual that holds me to account, but we're here for the public. So I am interested in what you think about these things. So here we go then. Here's a bit of a blast of some of what's been happening over the last year, and I'm not going to talk through it at length, but needless to say that I think some quite good things have happened. Crime has continued to fall. It's like quite surprising through a recession for that to happen. So 5 years ago, we recorded 150,000 crimes plus in Hampshire and Isle of Wight. Sounds a lot, doesn't it? But there's 1.9 million people. In April this year, it's going to finish at about 104,000. So it will have reduced by a third in 5 years. And probably most of you, I can see it in your faces, you're breathing, yeah, but you don't believe the figures, they're not right. Actually, I audit, and until recently I've personally done this, I've looked at them myself, about 500 crimes and incidents a week. It's quite a lot, isn't it, to check that we're not fiddling the figures, and we are not fiddling the figures. A crime is recorded on the balance of probability. Is it more likely it happened? Is it less likely it happened? If it's more likely, we record it. Now actually, there are grey areas there, which is why you see in the media about police occasionally unrecording or recording things wrongly. But what I would say is those crime recording figures are as accurate as they can be, and I would urge all of you to tell the people that you represent, members of the public, I want them to report crime. I want to understand what's happening out there. It's not in my interest to suppress the reporting of crime at all. So crime's fallen, which is interesting. Victim satisfaction is up there. 86% of victims of crime that we survey, and it's surveyed by an independent body, so it's fair, say that they're satisfied, very or completely satisfied. That's the highest it's ever been in Hampshire. And I know that Simon will be sitting next to me thinking, yeah, but it's 89% in my patch, and it is. So Simon's always been very good at leading victim satisfaction. He's done it again in Basingstoke. I don't know how he does it. He'll have to tell you himself. And social behaviours reduced. Again, big partnership effort with the council, and we're still solving about a third of crimes. About 35% of crimes that are reported are solved in Basingstoke. The bit up the top says SAC. That means acquisitive crime, serious acquisitive crime, robberies and burglaries. In my experience as a police officer, and I've worked in 3 areas, if you let people that steal things run uncontrolled in your area, they will commit 10, 15 or more crimes a day, and crime will spiral out of control. I need Simon's team to understand who's committing crime and get on top of them very, very quickly to stop them committing crime. And that's what I mean when I talk about hostile environment. Now actually where Mr. Hayes' police and crime plan significantly plays in here is that we are developing lots more ways with other agencies to rehabilitate them, to keep them out of trouble. And of course that will deliver even longer term better reductions. So last year has gone pretty well. And given that we've taken all that money out, hopefully you'll forgive me for feeling reasonably pleased about some aspects of that. Here's a bit about the money without boring you. I'm building up to an explanation as to why we're the 6th cheapest police force in England and Wales per head of population. So people in your area, Basingstoke and Dean, pay the 6th lowest amount of any people in England and Wales for their police service. And I always find that people find that reasonably surprising, given that I'm sure many of you are businessmen and women, and you certainly live in this area. You know that it's quite a pricey place to live and work. So there are various reasons why that's the case. The 2 biggest ones that I want to talk about is that you'll see the bandy average council tax is flashed up there, £151.25. That's very low. And I'm not being critical of that. We all want to pay low taxes and have good services, but it's low compared to the average, which you'll see up there, 172. Oh, sorry about that. Can you make that go? Yeah. The other thing that happens is that most of our grant comes from central government, and central government reserve the right to do something they call damp it. So if they think that we've got more than they want, they take money off some forces and they give it to others. we are damped by £10 million, which I can't begin to explain. I think it's most unfair, and I certainly pressure my MPs in the force area to do something about it. The bottom line is, when Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary last came into Hampshire and they compared us to all of the other forces, if we received the average funding of other forces, not more than average, just the average, we'd have £39 million more, which would be quite a lot given where we are. Now, actually, the situation is, because we're a cheap force, many of the things that I've done over the last 4 years, and whilst I've only been chief a year, I've been Deputy Chief Constable driving change for that 4-year period. Many of the things that we've done to save money, other forces are doing now. I've got to go to the next phase this next time round. Now, here's... Oh, what happened there? I was expecting a different slide. There's a rather ugly looking bloke up there. So skip that, jump ahead then. Last time we made the savings, as I said, we did some of the things that other forces are just doing now. If I just asked the police officers and police staff that work for me, and there are currently about 5,500, to keep doing everything you're doing in the same way, but by the way, there's going to be £25 million less of you, which is what I've got to find now, another £25 million, I would break them. And actually, I want to keep good people. They're in it for vocational reasons. They want to make a difference. They're not in it to be rich men and women. So I've got to create an environment within which they flourish and they can provide great public service, customer service to the people they deal with. So actually, I need to recognise, and I did here, I guess I was one of the first chiefs in the country to say, things are getting tight, things are going to have to change if we're going to carry on like this. So a moment just to say, okay, Chief, what did you do last time? Some of what we did last time is in the bottom left of this slide. We took a load of money, almost £11 million out of the back office corporate support. So that was about 50% savings I made in departments such as finance and HR. And I'm going to drive further savings out of that by collaborating with the county council. I took a lot of money out of what I call protective services, the sort of policing that you don't see, but if it isn't there, you'll know you've got a problem. So Serious Crime Directorate is murder and major crime investigation, counter-terrorism, all of those sorts of things. I took almost £5 million out of my intelligence capability, a big, big whack, given that I put a huge store on finding out who's committing crime and getting on top of them very quickly. And then I took a load of money out of the Criminal Justice Department by fewer people touching jobs more quickly. So you just move it through more quickly. And you go, yeah, you should have done that, Chief. Like, well done, you should have done that before. I can't do it all again. It amounted to 976 people fewer working for me than did in 2010. So that's a bit about how we made the money last time. Now, where are we now then in terms of our structure? This is how we're organised. We've got 3 areas, and within those 3 areas, we've got a number of districts. And you'll see some observations sitting around the edge of it about where I think the weaknesses of that are. It was a structure really that suited my needs. And if I'm critical of policing, and I've been in it almost 30 years, for too long we've probably done policing in the way that suited us as opposed to suited the public. Certainly with the advent of police and crime commissioners, that is completely turned on its head. We are putting victims and witnesses at the heart of everything we do. We're here for the public, we put them first. So this structure enabled me to hold people to account and organise things, but it obviously provided 3 tiers of bureaucracy and support, which I feel I need to remove. And I think this is probably most important of all. There are 2 really important tactics to reducing crime: catching offenders and managing them, and then secondly, working in partnership to problem solve. And partnership isn't all about crime reduction, it's also about vulnerability. So vulnerable older people, vulnerable children, all of those communities that we know we need to protect. This structure didn't support good partnership working, and I think we can get a huge dividend out of working better in partnership across the whole force. And I've already said, actually, I think you do it brilliantly here. So that is shining a bit of a light for others to follow. But there's money in this structure, and whilst when I became chief last January, it would have been quite nice to dig my heels in and say, do you know what, we've just had a massive change. The organisation now needs stability. I would break the organisation and break people if we just carried on and took another £25 million out of it. So when I asked my deputy and a team of my brightest people, I took my 4 brightest chief superintendents out of their day jobs and said, you need to now think and involve the 5,500 free brains that work for me in designing a model that's going to deliver some excellent results for £25 million less than we'll have in April 2014. And these were some of the challenges I threw down for them. And you should notice that the police and crime plan, Mr. Hayes' logo has popped up, because the bottom line is that he's set an agenda for me, which I need to create an organisation fit to deliver that. And I needed to make some changes to do that. And you'll see that the victims and witness bit is at the top. But in taking a load of money out, what I didn't want to do was break the relationship between senior police leadership, local authorities, but most importantly of all, the communities we're there to serve. And of course, the local senior officer is one of the things that's come out of this that I've discussed at length with Mr. Hayes. Because of where we took the money last time from, those 1,000 jobs, almost exclusively back and middle office and hidden policing, all of it very important but often hidden, 93% of my resources work in the visible front line now. So I'm afraid I've got to take the next load of savings out of the visible front line. I obviously want to look at all of the areas where we are more expensive than other forces, and there aren't many. I tell you, there are very few, given what I've said about being a cheap force. But we are quite hot with management on costs around sergeant and inspectors, and I'll be making about a third of my £25 million savings by reducing the management on costs at sergeant and inspector level. We can't continue to operate at all the bases we operate from, never mind the cost of running them, which Mr. Hayes is concerned about reducing and giving us bases that are fit for purpose and fit for the public. Actually, I can't spread that jam thinly across all the bases we work from, so we need to consolidate. And that does mean fewer but more significant hubs, but local safe and neighbourhood officers working in the vast majority of cases in partnership with key partners such as the local authority, actually embedded in their buildings, working better in partnership. And sitting either side of this operational change programme, I want to save as much money as I can through collaborating with the fire and rescue people and the county council, and as much money as I can working in partnership with the Thames Valley Police. Now, if those bits, the sandwich bits, work well, you're thinking, well, what difference does it make for me? You won't even notice a difference. It will be just as good, but more resilient, if anything. So that's what I'm trying to achieve. Now, the Police and Crime Commissioner talked about red lines. I'm not going to go through all of them, but some of these red lines were teased out in a publicly broadcast Compass meeting, as the Commissioner calls them, where I'm held to account by him. So no doubt you could find that on the internet. But this was a process of negotiation about understanding what was most important to the Commissioner about delivering his police and crime plan. And I think there's some real strengths in this. We are maintaining a priority on safe and neighbourhood policing. And in my time in policing, that's been one of the biggest revolutions in policing. When I joined the police, we really played, whatever anyone says about rose-tinted spectacles, we really played with safe and neighbourhood beat management. We didn't do it. This really introduced it properly. And particularly with PCSOs, who are absolutely dedicated to the areas they serve. They won't be moved out of them. So that's been a revolution that we want to protect and build upon. Indeed, some forces, I know for a fact, are considering, through this round of savings, getting rid of every single one of their PCSOs. Well, one of the Commissioner's red lines is that we won't get rid of any. We will maintain 333. Because of our funding position, we've got the second lowest number of PCSOs per head of population of any force in the country, so I personally think that's a very good idea. And you'll see some of the other things there. Technology. We're at the forefront of developing digital technology with the criminal justice system. Every single officer in Hampshire and Isle of Wight will be personally issued with body-worn video, and you'll see some exciting images from that about how we're gaining earlier admissions and guilty pleas, how we're presenting evidence better, how there's better sentencing. We will be, I believe, the first police force in the world where every officer is issued with body-worn video. That should be happening completed this year, and there's already a lot of it about. And then Operation Fortress. Does anyone know what Operation Fortress is? Yeah, but I will just spend a moment explaining. In Southampton, about 3 years ago, there was a very real risk that armed criminality and violent criminality associated with drugs sales would get a foothold within Hampshire through Southampton. Now, my previous experience, I had a couple of forces, but I policed in Bristol in the late 90s and early 2000s, noughties I think they're referred to, as a police commander for Bristol, and we focused too much on problem solving to the detriment of enforcement, and some very serious armed criminality. At that time it happened to be Yardie based gangs, brought guns and drugs to Bristol, crack cocaine in amounts that made it a drug capital of Britain in many respects. Crime absolutely rocketed, and there were individuals committing robberies and burglaries and car crimes that needed to steal about £1 million of goods every year to buy their drugs. Now we will not let that happen in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. It happened, if it happened in Southampton or Portsmouth or Aldershot, it would affect you, believe it or not. Now I'm just going to show you why I know that to be the case. These three guys in the top right, I'm having trouble with left and right as well, leader, were convicted recently of murdering the young man with the glasses in the little window element of this slide. They shot him in the head over a drugs debt. Happened in Southampton in April last year. Just to prove the criminal justice system is speeding up and is working better, they were sentenced a few weeks ago to 29, 30 and 31 years minimum terms life. That's a long sentence. In my police experience, the longest I've ever seen. Now, we caught them very quickly. We don't want this sort of thing happening in Hampshire and Isle of Wight. We won't let it happen. But just to show you how close to home it is, I don't know whether you know, but these three individuals, after they'd murdered the guy, got straight in a taxi to Basingstoke. Did you know that? It was in the media. So they got in a taxi to Basingstoke, and they were picked up by the woman with a scarf on her head and taken back to London. She was convicted as well, by the way. Now, the gun that you see, the pistol, is a 9mm Browning. It wasn't the one used in this offence. We didn't ever recover that, sadly. But there are very few guns in criminal hands in use in England and Wales. The National Ballistic Intelligence Service tracks them all through ballistic material submitted. There's no more than 1,000, and they tend to go through criminals' hands and get rotated round crime to crime. Well, we did 3 warrants in Southampton. The case was convicted in recent weeks, where we recovered 16 weapons. That was one of the weapons we recovered from an armourer. Now, we won't let that happen in Hampshire and Isle of Wight, and you think, well, blimey, that's Southampton. One of the weapons we recovered was an AK-47 with ammunition, which we recovered in the New Forest, believe it or not. So what the Commissioner has said to me is that not only will he extend the funding for Fortress, because it was done with additional money, it wasn't done with core grant, not only will he extend it, but the principles will be extended to the whole of the force area. And the principles are not only about enforcement, they are working in partnership to make sure young people don't see people like these guys as role models, and they're not allowed to get away with these sorts of crimes. So, very briefly, a little bit about, this is a journey of discovery for me. It's not what I've got in front of me. A little bit about the design features of this. Given that we've got less money and less people, and I'll tell you how many less we've got in a moment, we need to use intelligence better. So we will be putting investment and protecting intelligence to make sure we do understand who's vulnerable but who's committing crime. And actually, more and more with scarce police resources, we will have to focus on the most vulnerable. And an example of this is where we work in partnership is each morning there's a management meeting on Simon's patch. He'll chair it most days, and they'll talk about what's happening. But believe it or not, they spend probably most of their time talking about vulnerable missing people. In fact, you've got one at the moment, a young girl that's missing. Now, almost certainly that young girl is being sexually abused by a male predator. We are going to have to focus resources on dealing with the most vulnerable people and protecting them, but not just getting them back if they're missing. We need to solve these problems. And you'll see down the bottom of these bullets, early intervention. This is where the partnership working really comes in that we've got to understand what the reasons of crime, what the reasons of vulnerability are, and work better to solve them, to make sure that we touch people once and once only. If someone's arrested, especially a young person, they don't come back. We will absolutely maintain our 999 response capability. And how are you going to do that, you might well ask, with fewer people? We are going to have to blur the boundaries of response. At the moment, our response teams work from 11 district hubs, and they respond within their area. Now, of course, they work Hampshire and Sudbury, and of course, they'll cross borders to respond. But actually, the way we're arranged and organised makes that difficult. So I am, under this reorganisation, there will be 4 commands. And one of the commands will be response, and that Chief Superintendent will be responsible for response across the whole force. I don't believe there'll be any reduction in response times, but your response officers will not always come from the same place. But actually, as members of the public wanting value, I think you'd expect that. It's the way the AA and RAC operates, the way the ambulance service operates. A second command is around safer neighbourhood teams, and I will just say a bit more about that in a moment, because I think that's probably the most interesting one for you. The third command is around crime investigation. We will have fewer teams of specialist officers and bigger teams of omnicompetent investigators that I can throw at the next problem that walks through the door, as opposed to lots of people saying, no, not my job, not my job, someone else pass it down the road. So fewer investigation teams. And then the last command will be intelligence, and I've said why that's important. Neighbourhood is the bit that is probably going to have most impact on you, and we've already made decisions about who's going to be in charge of this, which senior managers, chief inspectors, will be hopefully looking to embed with local authorities, not just work closely to align with them, embed them hopefully in the same premises. And we've selected Simon because actually I think knowing and understanding your police officers, your PCSOs and your bosses is really important in trust, confidence and partnership. And the people I'm appointing now, I'm saying, unless something personal happens, you're going to be staying put for 2 to 3 years, which hopefully that will be welcome from the merry-go-round which we've been accused of running in the past. We will have to reduce officers in safer neighbourhood teams, not PCSOs, but the officers that are left absolutely will be ring-fenced. So even though there will be fewer, and this map, you'll believe this when you see it, I believe that you'll see more of them because they'll be ring-fenced and not, we call it abstracted, it's probably a police word. We are going to have to protect our capability in terms of safeguarding and offender management and vulnerable people. I'm afraid that sexual exploitation of young people, I'm sure it's been going on for many years, but there is a very sharp focus being brought to bear on it, and clearly it's unacceptable, so we're having to work hard to deal with that. And we will maintain the dedicated rural response, which I think is pretty important in this area. Like last slide then, before questions and comments, what does it mean on numbers? And you'll hopefully forgive me for this because it does have an impact on numbers, but I'm sure you understand that policing is a people business. More than 85% of the budget which Mr. Hayes gives me is spent on people. So actually you would expect 25 million to be at least 85% of that 25 million is people coming out of my payroll. And it means a further 535. Now I've got people working on exactly who, what, where. They are engaging with partners, engaging with the public, discussing it with the people who work for me to fine-tune that detail, but we are pretty confident it's going to be in the region of 500 and a range of police officers and police staff as yet to be determined, not including any police community support officers. So, ladies and gentlemen, Leader, I think that's enough from me for now, isn't it?
Could you put the last slide? Andy?
Oh yeah, I didn't.
There it is.
I got carried away, didn't I?
You did.
Yeah.
You did get carried away.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. It's a very quick, because we want to be brief and give you plenty of time to participate in this evening, overview of where we're going. I think it is a reasonable thing to say that in this borough we have focused over the recent years a lot on ensuring that we have an adequate level of community safety. We do that as much as anything by the investment that we put into it, particularly in maintaining our own patrolling team. But that patrolling team works very closely together with the police. When Andy talks about the morning meeting, council officers are there at the morning meeting alongside police officers, and they all work very closely together. It is one thing which I am absolutely categoric about, that as long as I am leader, we are not going to reduce our focus on maintaining community safety within this borough, and will do whatever is necessary to make sure that we achieve the levels that we currently have, and in fact continue to see falling levels of crime and antisocial behaviour, and they have consistently fallen over the last 5 or more years, which I think is something which we should all be very proud of and very grateful to all those who are involved in the process. But it's like one of these things, you know, like a balloon. You squeeze one side of it and it pops out somewhere else. The job is never done. So we have to keep that level of concentration, and we can only do it by working together with our partners. And therefore we have to have confidence that what our partners are doing is the right thing. So now is the time for you to question those who are responsible for it, and to whether or not you have that degree of confidence. But do feel free to ask Simon, or to ask Andy, or to ask the other Simon over the far side if you want specific things on the local situation, or if there are other areas which I've seen your hand, Paul, so that's fine, that affect the overall sort of community safety approach that we have within the borough. So may we start, please, with it would be very helpful if people would just say who they are so that we know where they're coming from. And can you please, for the sake of the webcast, please use the microphone, because then the camera will swivel round to pick up your features as you're speaking. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Paul Miller. I'm a ward councillor in Chinham. The reductions, of course, I would think all of us would consider them regrettable. But in your force area, what is happening, and I'm a chair of the Planning and Infrastructure Committee here in the council, is that the local plans for the various districts are now coming into play. And I know across your force area, especially down near Southampton, and certainly within the borough here, there's going to be an expansion of communities at quite a rate over the next 15 to 20 years. Now, with the reductions that are carrying on at the moment, presumably you're perfectly aware of them, I'm quite sure. Is there not a danger of dilution of your resources as these areas expand? Because the local PCSOs, for instance, will find that the areas that they have to patrol and monitor will actually get bigger and bigger, and they're going to be stretched.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. One of the things that will happen if the communities expand is that we should collect more police precept. So that hopefully will lead to some greater funding. The second thing is that, and this is where the Police and Crime Commissioner I know is active, and certainly I've explained this to local MPs who seem to understand what I'm saying, and you're influential men and women. The police grant is well overdue for review, and this idea of damping. And I also think that it's a fairly, it's an easy option just to top slice every police force with the same amount. There needs to be some recognition of forces that are efficient, effective, brackets cheap, and I do believe that the grant should be adjusted, the top slice or the damping should be removed, and we should frankly get some more money nationally. So I think there's two things I hope will happen to deal with what you've said. One is that we'll get more precept. The second is that the grant will get reviewed. It's something only a new government could do. You know, it's hardly going to be good to do a review of this before a general election. So there'll only be one chance to do it. Maybe in my time as chief, it's got to happen in 2015-16. So sharpen your pencils, please, and speak to your MPs. And the third thing is, I think there is a thing called Section 106 grants that we can ask developers to give us some money towards policing infrastructure. And I hope that we're sharp enough to be asking for money where we can justify it in those new communities.
Next question. Marilyn.
Thank you, Councillor Marion Tucker. I'm a rural. I have two questions. One is a sort of practical on the ground. In the past, on Remembrance Day, we've had police help with regard to sort of slowing the traffic down, so that you can have a number of people on the road, etc., etc., etc. As I understand it, from at least two parishes, they are coming up with, no, you can't have anybody to help you. I wondered if, for my first question, you could point me in a direction whereby they can have some help, or what they can do.
I'm going to ask Simon to answer this, because I've told him I don't want to write any checks that he can't cash.
Hello, Marion. Yes, I'm aware of that question. That's something that's come up, and it's come across the desk of both my rural inspector, Tim Bernice, and myself. Yes, we have to look at where the requests for police are, and we also have to look at what the role of the police are at each of those. We try and support the remembrance services that happen across the parishes, and it is the case that we don't have enough police officers to go to everyone. So what I've asked the rural inspector to do is make sure that we share our officers around each of those parishes. So it may be that you didn't have any cover this year. We will look at where we can go next year to try and rotate those resources around. But ultimately, we have to look at what the role of the police is at those services, and if it's to attend for the reasons of participating in those services, then that's got my support. But gone are the days when police officers' role and remit was road closures. So we need to be careful how we deploy there. But yes, we will support local parishes, but it needs to be almost on a shared basis, if that makes sense.
Simon, may I add something? This might be some comfort. It's really important that the local police are known, trusted, and on occasions, they're there for the public when they need them. So, take the flooding, for example. Our primary role was to coordinate resources and to prevent crime. There was only one flood-related crime, actually, by the way, in the whole of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and some idiot cut the fire hoses in Buckskin, which was very disappointing. But it was the only one we had. But I knew about it. I took it that seriously to find out. But I made sure that we were there for the public at their time of need. And there are times when we need to mourn with the public as well, and grieve with them, and remember people with them. We've got a lot of special constables. I'm going to ask Dave Powell, who's your area commander, chief superintendent. He leads on special constables for me, to see if we can muster lots and lots of special constables to help out, to make sure that we have as much presence as possible. I understand it's important.
Can I just come back, first of all, to say thank you? That would be incredibly helpful, because I didn't want, the average Joe to stand in the middle of the road and tell people to slow down when perhaps they might not. But that's really helpful, indeed. And the other thing is talking about the numbers of crimes and things like that. When you actually live in the middle of nowhere and you start sort of getting a country watch things, and you see just how much is going wrong in the rural areas, how do your figures, are they down the middle? Do they just cover the whole area? And yes, crime is down, but the fact that maybe it might have gone up in some of the rural areas, I don't know quite how it works.
There are various internet-related tools that you can see how crime's going up and down, but where possible, I do like PCSOs in particular to have a slot on a parish council meeting where they will turn up, say their piece, and then hopefully be released to go and keep people safe and fight crime and injustice again. And they'll tell you exactly what's happening with crime. Rural areas are, by and large, lower crime areas. I think we would all accept and understand that, but that's not diminishing the impact of rural crime, and probably most importantly of all, the fear of crime on the people that live in rural communities. Mr. Hayes would probably want to say something about his commitment to rural crime. I'm guessing, if I know him well.
That's my cue for now. Yes, I mean, when I came into office, it was clear to me, because I'd learnt at the election, that there was a feeling that the attention that police gave to rural criminality was less than they gave to urban areas. So there was an imbalance. So it was a priority for me, and still is, to close that gap between the police commitment to rural crime and urban crime. And to that end, the rural police strategy has been reviewed and published towards the end. I think it was November last year. And so there is a stronger commitment amongst the constabulary to fighting rural crime and criminality. All the police officers and PCSOs who are assigned to rural beats, so that's about 1,200 of them, will receive specific training about what is expected from a police officer in a rural area, and to understand really what rural criminality is about. Because I think it was clear that wasn't always the case. I'm not sure that I could tell the difference between a hare and a rabbit, or a lurcher and somebody out with a rescue greyhound. Now, the fact I can't doesn't matter so much. It's critically important that police officers can. And so that's what this training is about, and it has started and begun. And already we're seeing some successes, I think, in rural areas. We saw 2 convictions through the magistrates' courts in January this year, where poachers had their dogs forfeited, and there were considerable fines that went along with that. And we saw, I think, from memory, three individuals who were sent to prison for about 26 years for committing 80 rural burglaries, not just in Hampshire, but the northern part of Hampshire and other areas. So the constabulary are beginning to make progress in raising the importance of combating rural criminality.
I've seen lots of things happen in policing over the years, and when I've seen this happen, I haven't liked it as someone who's been on the wrong end of it. So I'm certainly not going to start dishing out as chief constable, and that's where failure is rewarded and success is punished. So in a military doctrine, you would certainly reward success and be slightly harsher on failure. So I won't be looking to take resources away from Basingstoke because you've been doing well. In fact, Basingstoke is, and I said this to Simon just before I came over here, is possibly one of our most, if not the most, challenging chief inspector post. So I want good people around it, and I certainly need to stay on top of it. I know that in terms of commerce and the economy, this is a flourishing area to which you're seeking to attract investment, and you've done very well in it. And actually, you won't do so well if crime flourishes. Indeed, the communities feel that they can't come here and safely live and work or visit here. So I think it's an incredibly important issue, and I'm heartened by the fact that your communities recognise that in their surveys. And so the answer is no. I won't be looking to take resources away because of that.
Thank you. I've got 3 questions now. The first of which is is Ranil.
Thank you, Leader. Ranil Jayawardena. I'm Deputy Leader of the Council, but I'm here in my ward capacity as Councillor for Bramley and Sherfield. Local residents are already aware of the pressures, and you've outlined them tonight on the police budget, and they recognise that there will be change ahead. Equally, they are concerned around the changes that could result in them not having a clear link to a police constable. Although I hear what you said around PCSOs, could you just outline in a little more detail what you see the shape of the Safer Neighbourhoods teams being in terms of Currently, Bramley Sherfield is, I believe, a joint team with the Pembrokeshire and Silchester ward. How big would you see that going? Would there still be a PC responsible for that area, and so on?
We are still in the design phase of that, and I'm looking to have more detailed plans out in May of this year. Simon is actually much more connected up with the discussions that are going on, and so I think we'll probably give you a better answer, Simon.
Yes, certainly when I know the finer detail, I've said to the leader that I will come back before you and start to put some context around where locations are and what numbers are involved. But the new model will still be committed to safer neighbourhood policing, and that model means that there will be a combination of both PCSOs and PCs working together. And I go back to before. We then look at what the role of those those officers are. And if you look online and you sort of go towards the principles of safer neighbourhood policing, there's 10 there, and it gives you a really good idea of what it is we're trying to achieve. And part of that is engagement, and it is driving confidence in policing. And that engagement must be done by our PCSOs. We then look at our police officers who work in that team to go to where those PCSOs have got problems. So the idea of every neighbourhood or every parish having their own police officer will have to change, and it will look very similar to a team of rural officers, and yet to determine the number of those, who will tackle the problems, but they will still have their local ownership of areas where they've got default locations to, but they will have to tackle some of the criminality and some of the problems associated with cross-border crime and some of the local community crime. But if you look at how well we've done over the last 3 years in reducing crime, we know that model can work. We've already started doing it in the town. So in the town itself, we've got our teams aligned that way. And in due course, I think the rural will come along, because we still need to target those people that are causing us the most harm. So need to free up our police officers to tackle that and do more than just some of the engagement level that they're doing at the moment.
And if I might just add, we can't do enough communications with councillors and parish councils, district councillors, parish councillors. So I know that there have been discussions within the constabulary this week about weekly updates, far clearer communication and engagement. And I mean, the good news is there still is opportunity to influence this and talk about it.
Supplementary?
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for that explanation. I completely hear what you say around there not being necessarily one PC per parish and so on. I get that. I think it's more a case that people want to know that there is a PC that is responsible ultimately for them. And that comes to the communication point as well, and that's very welcome, and I'll certainly take you up on that. And also perhaps, without wanting to take up too much of the meeting, we could also have a conversation around the damping that you talked about, because I'd be very interested to hear more about that.
Paul Franklin.
I'm Councillor Paul Franklin, I represent the Popley West ward. I've got two questions around the crime figures. One is, the figures you've given the reported crime, the number of constituents I talk to that won't report a crime, they've had stuff stolen, damage to their house, they say, police won't do anything, no point reporting it. So what are you going to do to tackle that? I try and explain to them it can help build a picture. They might not solve your crime, but it might build a bigger picture and you can deal with it. And so I do and try and encourage them to, but as a force, what you so that you do that. And one of the websites the PCSOs are suggesting people go to look is crimereports.co.uk. Well, Saturday there was an incident around my house. Probably took most of your force up dealing with it. And there's no record on that to say there was any even call or anything on it. So how can I trust that information? Also, they've used that report in licensing, on the licensing committee, to try and say there's crime. Well, how much weight do I give it? Because I personally have got no faith in it now, because I've not seen anything on there. Finally today, there's other damage for a time that was about 3 hours later than the actual incident. So is there a better site to go to? I'll leave it there for you to answer it.
Right. The first question on crime reporting. 1.9 million people live in Hampshire and Isle of Wight. Believe it or not, British Crime Survey will say that 43% of that population say they have contact with the police in the previous 12 months. So we touch a lot of people every year. I know, for example, over 1 million people ring our control room, let alone how many we speak to on the streets. Now actually, one of the positive benefits about that is in trying to change and improve policing culture and build trust and confidence, that every single one of those is an opportunity for the public to see how good we are and to go away with a more positive impression of the constabulary than they had last time before they spoke to them. So the answer to the question is that actually people will report crime if they trust us and they have confidence in us. I am not complacent about that. That is what makes policing work. If I don't improve that as Chief Constable, I believe I'll have failed, and I'd be frankly very disappointed in myself. That's why I'm in policing. The second thing is actually that we need to make it easy for people to report crime on their terms. So, and part of this is about how do people interact with us. Now, of course, you can ring 101. Of course, you can ring 999 if it's an emergency. But we are currently working in partnership with Thames Valley Police, because this is about IT investment. And if there's one area that policing has not done well in my career, it's IT, because largely we invest in people, not technology. We're 43 forces. We're not good customers for IT companies. But with Thames Valley, we are one of the biggest policing areas in England and Wales. We are a good customer, and we're developing software at the moment which understands who you are as customers. So they'll know whether you've rung us before, they'll know where you live, they'll know what your priorities for your Safe and Able team are, and they'll treat you as an individual. You won't have to go through the same story again and again and again, but you will also be able to do stuff like report crime online interactively and things like that. So I'm going to make it easier for people to tell us about crime, and I'm grateful for your support in encouraging them to do that. Your second question was about the crime reports system. It downloads directly, I believe, from our records management system, our crime records management system. I don't know enough about exactly how that works or how long it takes or why that might not be on there, but I do want Simon to help you understand this problem. And if there's a quick answer, you could give it, Simon, but if not, you could agree to speak later.
Yeah, it's probably easier if we speak afterwards, but there's lots of reasons, and it could be something as simple as the crime hasn't been classified yet. It could be it could be also because it's happened in such a close vicinity to a number of houses that we would be able to identify where it's happened. So again, it would appear on the left-hand column as a number, but you wouldn't get a flag to say where it happened. But I'll speak to you afterwards. That data from crime reports, one of the greatest advantages is it's refreshed every 24 hours, sometimes longer over the weekend, it's 72, whereas the Police UK slide is slower. So that does have its advantages, but I'll speak to you afterwards as to why it might not be there.
Good.
Did
you have another one?
Just a quick one. I'd just like to thank the police that responded on Saturday. They were very professional and showed you in a very good light.
Thank you, Paul. Mike Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Mike Brown, Borghurst and North Tadley. I was interested in what you were saying in terms of how you've had to cut your, sergeants and inspectors. And does that affect your ability to retain constables, for instance, who therefore don't see any way perhaps of progressing?
Yeah, I think that's a very astute observation, actually. But when I became chief, there were a number of things on my mind. But as I went around the force and absorbed what people were saying to me, it became increasingly obvious to me that I did need to do something to increasingly motivate and retain my bright people. Otherwise, I risked them either leaving the service or going somewhere else. Now, when I joined the police 30 years ago, it really was seen as a vocational career. You get into it, and that's what you do. I think that is becoming increasingly less the case, and I'm going to have to work increasingly hard to retain experience. And let's not underestimate the value of experience. Some people would say, well, it doesn't matter, you get some other bright person from university, but policing is a craft or a profession that you learn over many years. So one of the things that I've done is, as well as being a values-based organisation, and it's good to work for a values-based organisation, is I've consulted my whole organisation on some leadership principles. So I'm working on creating world-class leadership that will make our organisation a great place to work, a good employer. Even though we can't pay them loads of money, and even though the job security is not what it was, and they pay more, work longer, get less in their pensions, they still want to work for me as an employer of choice. And actually, if you look on the internet at various MBA leadership type stuff, about what motivates people at work, the top 3 in every single survey that you'll look at, I guarantee you of this, will be your relationship with your boss. So I want, even though there'll be fewer leaders and fewer opportunities to become leaders, policing is a brilliant job. You know, if you get bored with it, it's your fault. It's an impossible job. You never finish it. It's still there when you come back to work tomorrow, and you take it home with you in many cases. But I've got to focus on those vocational aspects, and I'm doing a lot of very practical things to try and keep people developed, motivated, and invest their time in the organisation.
Thank you, Mike. Sir, you.
Yeah, Peter Blois from Old Basing and Lichpit Parish Council. I heard what you said in the question about PCSOs, and it does concern me that you've cut so many of your policemen. Now, we do get, I'm also pleased to hear, in fact, about that you're not going to do much abstraction, because often we lose our PCSO from Old Basing and Lichpit being so-called lower crime area. But the question is, PCSOs don't have much power, and the public know this. And is there any chance that you could give them some power, particularly over minor crime, which could lead to major incidents later on?
The PCSOs have got some enforcement capability, but it may well be that the Police and Crime Commissioner will want to say something about what his youth panel have advised him on PCSOs. But actually, their primary role is engagement and problem solving with other organisations. So actually, I've got other people that do enforcement. So whilst I've got 333, some communities will say, you know, take the PCSO away, you'll chop off my right arm. Other communities might be less enthusiastic. Actually, sometimes that's down to individuals, you know, how well the individual's performing. Now, if I get the leadership bit right, I'll reward success and I'll challenge poor performance, underperformance, or absence. But I don't believe it's appropriate to give the PCSOs more enforcement powers. And to be straight with you, I don't have the statutory capability to do that anyway. They've pretty much got all of the powers the government allow me to give them.
Just to come back on that, can you explain what powers, what limited powers they do have? Because I don't know.
Yes, Simon Dodds will talk about the powers they have. And the point I'd like to make is the government, I think, at the moment are consulting on the concept that you've raised about PCSOs getting more authority and power. I don't know how long they're going to take to distill that information, but that is kind of coming down the track. In terms of, Chief Counsel mentioned my youth commission, just to give a bit of a briefing to it. I felt I needed to understand what young people experienced around crime, in society. It's a long time since I was, 16 or 25 or whatever. So I decided to run a pilot that got together 25 young people from 3 geographic areas across Hampshire County. It was Southampton, it was Basingstoke, and it was East Hampshire. So you've got a rural and urban mix. I wanted them to be not the archetypal white middle-class articulate child, if you like. So we've got quite a good mix, and some of them had contact with the law. One of them was wearing a tag, but they came together for 6 months, and we ran it as a pilot, and it was successful, and we're going to continue it and roll it out further. But one of the things they looked into was the relationship between the constabulary and young people. And what was clear was that young people feel that a police constable is more threatening than a PCSO. I think not exclusively because police constables wear black and they've got all the kit. They don't have the time to engage. I think this is the point Simon Dodds was making earlier on. They don't have time to engage with the young, with the public or with young people in the same way that PCSOs do. So I think that it's an important role that PCSOs play, is that engagement with with young people particularly, and of course they can do that without any further additional powers. And I think if you give them too many powers and they become or are seen as threatening in that way, then you lose part of the purpose of them. But I think it's right that we review and come up with a decision and a response to government over their consultation over the future of PCSOs. And I think another point to make is that recruitment, as we've discussed, into the police service, both in Hampshire and the island and nationally, is really quite tight at the moment. But we do recruit, when we recruit into Hampshire Constabulary, from two groups. One is the Special Constable group, Chief Constable mentioned, in reference to Remembrance Day and road closures and so forth. And we also recruit from PCSOs, because they have learnt how to communicate with the public widely and sensitively and effectively. And that is partly why I think their role is so important. But as I say, what will come out of the government consultation, I don't know.
I'm going to ask, if I may, Simon Dodds to just elaborate on what those powers are. And I think it will be worth, in doing so, to remind ourselves that our own patrol officers from the council also have accredited powers very similar to those of PCSOs in Basingstoke. And we also have other officers who also have powers, particularly the I never know what they're called these days, but I call them traffic wardens. I think that's probably what they're called. Yeah. But they also have powers which the others don't, strangely enough. So it's quite a complex area. Simon, would you like to elaborate?
I can see the piece of paper that's on the wall in my office, and the list of PCSO powers is actually fairly extensive. And I suppose what I'll suggest is I'll circulate that through the leader, and then it can go out. But their focus is around dealing with ASB, so they've got the power to be able to ask for name and addresses. They can deal by way of fixed penalty notices for some types of offences, so for example littering or cycling offences. They've also got the power to detain people if they believe that an offence has been committed and a police officer needs to attend to arrest that person or to question that person. So they do have some quite extensive powers already, but it comes back to how well we work as a partnership as part of a community safer neighbourhood team.
Thank you. I mean, this was, I can remember, a big debate when we were talking about community wardens and patrol teams and things, exactly where they would fit. And I think it is a testament to how well the officers themselves have managed to tread this middle line of being an alternative to the police, but nevertheless one with a fair degree of enforcement power, that when you look at the levels of which ASB, in particular antisocial behaviour, have fallen, there is a very clear track record of that being successful. It's a delicate line. It's almost something which is more subtle than powers. It's to do with the way that you do the job. But it clearly does work, and I think having a uniform makes a difference, because half the time I couldn't tell the difference between them in the dark. So I don't know how you would. Tony Jones.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Jones, Buckskin Ward. First of all, I'd like to say thanks on behalf of the residents of Buckskin for the work you've done in the floods, because one of the biggest fears that was going on at the time where people were being evacuated was leaving their properties empty. And what's happened, you protected their properties, and I think so. Thanks, and people of Buckskin will thank you for that, because there was great fear out there. My question is, weekends, especially Saturday evenings, one of the frustrating things that comes across from time to time is that when there is an incident, they phone the police, and I know you've got to weigh up these certain incidents which are prioritised, and they don't get response not straight away, within a reasonable period of time. Are you shifting your shift patterns to focus more on a Saturday night rather than having them across the board on a Monday to Saturday? So we've got more police, more PCSOs available at those times of day.
Thank you. Thank you for the recognition. I know that Simon will pass that on. We're doing a number of things to do better with less, or to cope with demand. I talked about intervening earlier and solving problems. We realised through some work we've done in our control room, through a temporary experimental team called the Resolution Unit, which is a team of, believe it or not, more experienced police officers working in call handling, that actually they can resolve situations earlier on the phone to a greater degree of satisfaction with members of the public than actually trying to attend every incident or be all things to all people. So one of the things that we will certainly be doing is using some of the lessons from that resolution centre in our 101 and our 999 centre, so that we are using scarce resources judiciously in a way that satisfies the public. I think one of the things that we need to get better at, picking up your point, is actually management of expectations. So a really understanding what that individual needs, so that we can meet their needs in an appropriate way, and they understand exactly what we're going to do when, and we keep our promises. That's one of our values. We have values that, under an acronym called CARE, respecting people and keeping the promises is the R of it. We are going to have to say no to some people, and actually I'm sure that they will understand that if it's explained. In response to your question, we've worked carefully with a consultant, happens to be Deloitte's, on our demand management. And so not only are we trying to reduce and understand demand and meet needs in a different way, we are absolutely reviewing and changing our shift pattern and deployment to actually get the grease to the squeak when they need them, where they need them. So those are all parts of the science of change, which I would say Hampshire Constabulary is at the cutting edge of. The new College of Policing, led by our former Chief Constable Alex Marshall, is looking at what we're doing and certainly picking all of those shift management, resource management issues up into their national learning. So we're doing exactly what you say.
David Leakes.
It's going to be fun because I'm sorry to be sat there and the camera's going to be looking at a blank space. David Leakes, Councillor for Tadley. Are you still actively looking for premises in Tadley, or is that now going to go with perhaps the police houses, etc., etc.? Because at one time you were going to take away the police houses and office and then look for somewhere else.
If it's premises, it's got to be Simon.
The answer is yes, we are, but I'm not sure where we are in terms of looking at that and ideas. And I know when I came to Tadley, what was it, 9 or 10 months ago, 12 months ago, was it? Well, time goes quickly when you're enjoying yourself, doesn't it? It was then it was still then a topic, but since then we've done the review, the estates review that I spoke about. I've employed an expert, chap called James Payne, to be head of estates and management. But what I will do is, if it's acceptable, I'll email you with what the position is around Tadley, because I know that we had a couple of sites that we were talking about, but I don't know where we are specifically in that.
Okay, we're coming up to 8 o'clock. I've got 2 more questioners. Are there any other people who have questions they wish to put? 3, 4. I've now got 4 more questioners, 5 more questioners. If there's no more than that, then we'll go through those 5, and then we'll call it a day at the end of that. So the first one, you said.
Get the technology work. Hello, my name is Steve Spillane. I'm chairman of Silchester Parish Council, and I must say in Silchester the PCSO scheme and our PCSO Jim Rickaby is really excellent, and we share him with some of the other members here. And he's a brilliant conduit for us into the police and getting things done. And we've had several instances over the last 12 months where he's solved problems before they started, and that's been excellent. The thing we do have a problem with is getting the public to report crime or report instances. They don't trust the police, or they say the police won't do anything. And we know from your intelligence-led approach, it's important that people do report things so you can see a bigger picture. What work are you doing to try and create trust in the public and getting people to report crimes?
Well, refer back to the answer I gave the gentleman just over there. The main way that we will build trust and confidence is actually to make sure every single one of our public contacts, and we touch millions of people a year, actually go away saying, actually, they were all right, and they will tell their friends, and their friends will tell their friends. That is about cultural change within the police. You know, I'm not sitting here saying that we're perfect. We will continue to work hard to make sure that satisfaction with the police rises to be amongst the best in the country. But I guess I would want you to try and, outside of the meeting, help me understand why people might not trust us, so that we can start to do something about winning that trust and confidence. I'm pleased about what you said with the PCSO, for example. That's exactly the sort of work which is our best shop window, and I'm sure Simon will make sure that that feedback gets back to that individual with those things.
Oh, Ranul's crept in an extra question. Shouldn't be allowed, really, but anyway.
Thank you, Leader. A very quick one to the Commissioner, if I may, around the approach to the private sector. You've talked about, and I completely agree, the working together of different public authorities, but I wondered what plans, if any, you had at this moment to involve the private sector to help reduce costs going forward. For example, declare an interest through my employment, but I have some knowledge around vehicle fleets and the management that external companies could bring to that. Do you have any thoughts on more use of the private sector?
Yes, I have no concern about using consulting the private sector at all, apart from one area, which is the reliance on sponsorship. Now, it's okay to accept sponsorship for specific events or a conference or something like that, but not once we start relying upon funding for police cars or kit or equipment or anything like that. Because if that sponsorship stops, then we're left high and dry, or maybe literally with our trousers down. I don't know. But we do work with the private sector. Chief Constable has spoken about the use of Deloitte's consultancy. We work with the private sector around some of the forensic work that is done. In terms of the fleet, if you like, cars, we will tend to look towards a regional or national procurement scheme, and link into that, because it is, basically you can get, if the kit and equipment is right, better deals. So I don't have a problem with working with the private sector in that regard. I don't want to see private companies policing our streets, because if everything goes wrong, then the fallback is the constabulary. So I want to protect that. So it's a balance. It's a mixed economy, I suppose, is the answer.
And next, sir, the back there.
Colin Fowles, Overton Parish Council. We have recently lost our beat PC officer, who has been very, very effective over a number of years, and we've built a strong relationship with him as part of our community. We've seen a year-on-year consistent reduction in crime numbers, and the hostile environment you referred to he's been quite effective at generating. I think we were disappointed there was no notice or explanation or information on what will happen going forward and what comfort we can have regarding having a PC. I know he's moved to a neighbouring area or neighbouring beat, and I think we would be very, very pleased to see him back. And as I say, we have a partially rural community, and I work for an insurance company, and we, or certainly other people in the insurance industry, would be concerned that the rural community is not being well served by having PCs in the area and generating the environment that you refer to.
It's PC Richard Baldwin you refer to, absolutely fantastic officer, and almost a victim of his own success, in one of the reasons being behind why I've moved him. I have written a letter to the parish, so that should be with you fairly shortly. I wrote that earlier on this week. The beat officer up in Highclere has asked to go on to the call resolution unit, which is part of us looking forward about how we can reduce demand. So that's a secondment that he's gone on to, and it's something that we look at as part of his development to help him. Which in the meantime, as a district commander, and I've been here now for certainly 3 years in this chair, I know the threat that is faced by that A34 corridor, and we do get hit quite heavily from cross-border criminality coming down from Berkshire. And for the short-term period that the officer is seconded, I've asked Richard, in his experience, to go up to that beat to provide some extra resilience and visibility along that border. Now, Again, I don't know what my final figures will look like in terms of under the new organisational structure. So I don't know where Richard will be in the future, but he will be part of my, or I certainly would like him to be part of my my Safer Neighbourhood team out in the rural, and I'm sure he will continue to have a commitment to that area. I certainly know his sparkling rugby work that he does is something he's very passionate about, and he's continuing to engage in that this year. But in the meantime, whilst he is gone, the neighbourhood is not without police officers covering it. It is still part of our rural patrol strategy, and every morning we look at where the offences are, and if we've needed to put officers in there to deal with crime and criminal activity to support the PCSO there, we have done that.
Thank you. Rob Musson.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Rob Musson, I'm Ward Councillor for Tadley South. I've got a question on road safety that has come from some of the residents in Tadley. It's their belief that some of the money that comes from the fines from policing road safety, so in other words, speeding fines and things like that, is ring-fenced and it goes back into other road safety initiatives. So their concern is, and indeed my concern, I could be wrong in this, it could be it's not as we think, is that if there are less resources, then there's less ability to actually police the roads and get that income, which is then put back into road safety initiatives. So that then starts to spiral and the road safety starts to get worse. So the concern is, will this reduction in resources result in less funds for road safety initiatives?
I think that's probably one for you, Simon.
Right, Chairman, I was hoping you'd go to your left on this one rather than. I think I'm right in saying that the money for road safety is ring fence and has to go back into road safety. I'm kind of looking for a nod from the left, but yeah. So I think your fears are not founded in that regard.
I think the point you were making is if there's less enforcement, there's less money to be recycled, which is correct, there would be. I think what I'd invite you to do is if you let me have your email, I'll email you exactly how much money is generated from road safety related activity and then is reinvested. It is actually a relatively small amount. Most of it does go to central government. A very small amount comes back. The vast majority of what we make, and we're talking in the region of hundreds of thousands of pounds, not millions, so, and 2 or 3, I believe, is about right, but I'll let you have these details. It comes from the speed awareness course that we run. So if you get caught within a certain criteria, so you're not going mad, you get the opportunity to go on a speed awareness course. People been on those? Yeah. Thank you for owning up. What an honest council you've got. And actually we make a bit of money. They're quite cheap, to be fair, but we make a bit of money out of that, all of which absolutely we don't make money out of speed enforcement, as people might like to think, gets reinvested into road safety. It isn't very much, so even if that reduces, which in truth I don't really think it will, it would be at the margins of road safety. I am, by the way, a supporter of community speed watch initiatives. I think you've got some up in the north. I've seen them where they're well run have a really big impact on average speeds in communities and come right down. So I mean, I think, you know, we've talked about policing in numbers a lot, and we've talked about powers. Policing in England and Wales even before these cuts, we were low on numbers and low on powers. You know, we're routinely unarmed. We can only work this way because we've actually got strong supportive communities that do some self-regulation. You know, where there's a strong community, crime is not tolerated, and speeding also is not tolerated. Community Speed Watch is a demonstration of that. So certainly what I'll be looking for is not vigilante activity, but working with partner agencies to see what we can do to build communities that can help themselves. And certainly an example we've seen in the flooding, some of the communities that have responded best and we know will recover the quickest are the ones that have felt a little bit more in control of what's happening because they can do something to help themselves. So, you know, speed is a big priority in rural areas. We will maintain a focus on it.
Can I just say on community speed watch schemes, we have a budget to support communities who want to set up speed watch schemes. and we will match fund that. So if you want to set up one, or you're thinking about it, then please contact my office or me, and we can talk about supporting the funding on that, because they are hugely successful. They need to be supported by the constabulary, by the police, and what you've heard from the Chief Constable is that they will be.
Thank you. Right, I have two more questioners. First of all, yourself, sir. Microphone, please.
Is that it? I'm Lawrence Martin. I run a small business in town. And I'd like to point out that businesses are victims of crime too. I've got sort of two questions. Firstly, what are the plans for engaging with business? You've been talking about engagement with the community, so how are you planning to engage with business? And on the point of the software, has business as a victim of crime been factored into the design of the software that you mentioned earlier?
If I can answer the software question, the Commissioner is doing engagement with retail crime and business-related crime, so I know that he would want to say something about that. There is a new initiative that's part of our community engagement crime reporting work, and it's called FaceWatch, and it allows businesses to report crime and provide evidence online. Are you familiar with that? Yeah, we're doing that at Basingstoke, aren't we, Simon? Do you just want to say something about that? Oh, that's awful, isn't it?
Mental note, turn microphone off first. FaceWatch is a way that we can circulate some of the imagery that we get through the many CCTV images that are out there. And historically, what used to happen is we used to take the videotape back to the police station, plug it in, and put a picture on a briefing document. But actually, that was only seen by a handful of people. And FaceWatch aims to put that out more broadly into the public arena, to ask people to phone in relation to those involved in crime, and it's predominantly retail and business type crime that it focuses on.
Yes, the police and crime plan I spoke about at the beginning, which I set up a year ago, was deficient in that it didn't mention crime against businesses, and we're refreshing it at the moment, and it is going to. What I'm doing is I've been talking with the Federation of Small Business, initially, Wessex Federation of Small Businesses, with the CBI and with chambers of trade across Hampshire, to find ways of engaging with small businesses, and I have been to some meetings. What is clear is that I think the reporting of business crime hasn't been as effective and as efficient as it should be. Not that it's ignored, but it's not there. And we don't have these statistics around that. So there's a lot of engagement work that is beginning to happen. And I think the first thing that you'll probably see, I don't know if you're a member of either of those three groups, a Chamber of Commerce or FSB or CBI, but we're going to start off with a simple survey, which is supported and sponsored, I suppose is the right word. I don't mean financially, but in terms of the support through the FSB, to try to work out whether it is a Hampshire-wide problem in terms of people feel it's not consulted, and then what we can do to raise the profile of it. But it is hugely important. I think that we've missed it off the radar before now.
Thank you very much. And then our last question, Keith Watts.
Thank you, Leader. Arising on the speed awareness course, someone close to me recently did the course, but when he eventually admitted to me that he was needing to do this, the reason was that the only way you can book on the course is online or by telephone using a credit or debit card. It's been on my list to write to the Chief Constable about, but more important things have arisen. I think that's rather amazing, really, that there's that restriction. And then when it did take place, it takes place in a luxury hotel on the outskirts of Basingstoke without public transport access. If we want the speed awareness course to be popular throughout the population, shouldn't we make it more accessible?
I guess, we accept payment in those means to try and keep costs down. It used to be when I arrived in Hampshire Constabulary, I'd get my expenses brought to me pretty much on a silver platter by cheque. I mean, we can't do business. People don't write cheques anymore. So, I'm not trivialising your issue, but the reason why we do that is to keep costs down. I imagine because actually we engage with the private sector to deliver these courses, that must be the most cost-effective way that they can deliver that, because they are looking to save money just as much as I am. But I can't speak for that hotel, but they must get a good rate. Just to illustrate to you that there is a customer focus aspect to this. Police forces used to run their own speed awareness course efforts. So if you got caught in Northumbria, you either went up to Northumbria to do the course, or you paid your money and took the points. Now actually, we were one of the first forces, and we are a member of a consortium of forces, that actually if you get caught in Northumbria, you get to do your course in Basingstoke if you choose to do so. So more and more there are customer-facing aspects to what we're doing arising, and that's an example perhaps of how we have taken into account of what people say.
Could I come back? I think any business would find increasing turnover it was just as good as reducing costs. Most businesses provide means whereby payment can be made through a post office. I've found it absolutely amazing that reducing costs rather than increasing the number of people attending the course is your objective.
There is a very, very good take-up rate.
Thank you. I think one last one crept in there from the Deputy Mayor. Come on.
Okay, as one of the honest people here, I have been on a speed awareness course. I found its educational value was worth the money, and I think it's a shame that you've actually got to commit an offence to go on it. So I think there may actually be a revenue-raising potential in offering speed awareness courses to the general public.
Thank you for that. I have to say my wife would not agree with you. Chief Constable.
I'm glad it was a good experience. That's universally what people tell me about it. For once, I'm one step ahead of the question. This is getting better, although I'm sure you'll want to go home. We've got a charity within Hampshire and the Isle of Wight called the Blue Lamp Trust, BLT. And actually what that trust does, its primary function is to deliver bobby van services, so services where a trusted and vetted fitter goes to the houses of vulnerable people, especially ones who've just been burgled, and gives them some security so they feel safe in their own home. Great, it's a great service to provide. It is funded primarily through providing the courses that you describe to businesses. So we had a question from a businessman here, but businesses have got a corporate responsibility to make sure that their people are safe driving around, and also we do provide a slightly varied speed awareness course that covers fuel efficiency, and we found that fuel efficiency can improve by, believe it or not, up to 30% by some sensible driving. So the Blue Lamp Trust, and I'm a trustee on that charity, actually proactively seeks to sell speed awareness courses to business, actually, not to members of the public, but to business, and it puts money back into community safety initiatives. I don't know how we would or we could market to individuals, but you've certainly given me some food for thought to take back to the next trustees meeting with a proposal.
Good. Thank you all. I think what we've heard tonight has just proves the point that this is dealing with crime and antisocial behaviour and our own safety in our homes and out on the streets is a multifaceted activity. It's not something which we should just sit back and say, right, the police will deal with this, the crime commissioner will deal with this, the council will deal with this. It's something which everybody has to be involved if it's going to be successful. I think we can allow ourselves a pat on the back that of all the districts in Hampshire, we have been consistently the most successful over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And I think it is quite clearly noticeable that the reason we have been the most successful is because we've had the best partnership working during that period, and it has been, and that is the key to our success. So an evening like this, and I would thank the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable and the Chief Inspector for joining us this evening, is really very useful. But this dialogue has to go on, and I think I can speak for all of them, that if and when, and it's certainly more when than if, issues arise in the future, they would want to hear from you directly. There should be absolutely no worry about sending an email, ringing them up, whatever you find is the best way of communicating to get the points through. If people don't say something, you can't expect them to know about it and to deal with it. And I would encourage all of you who are largely representatives of other bodies to encourage that kind of dialogue. It can be fed in at any level, whether it's through your local councillor, whether it's through your local Bobby on the beat, through the PCSO, wherever. I'm sure it will be picked up. We need to encourage that kind of dialogue if we're going to carry on being successful, but I'm sure we all will. So may I just conclude by thanking all of you for taking the time and trouble to come this evening. This is really a key element of the enjoyment of living in the borough that we're dealing with here, and very much appreciate your attendance this evening. Thank you all very much.